Welcome to Season 2 of When It Rains, the podcast where real people share how they've overcome life storms. I'm your host, Martine H.Powell, and this season, we'll bring you stories of strength, resilience, and hope, reminding us all that challenges don't define us, they grow us. Because here on When It Rains, it doesn't have to pour. Thanks for tuning in. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of When It Rains. I am your host, Martine H. Powell, and I have taken a little bit of time off because I needed it. But I am back, and I have a very special guest with me today to talk about something that I think is very important. She is a licensed marriage and family therapist. She is my homegirl. We have been friends since childhood. She is a sorority sister, and she is here today to talk about something, as I said, I feel like is important. We're going to talk about the N-word, but it is not the N-word that everybody thinks about, because I don't use that word. I don't care how you spell it. We're going to talk about narcissistic personality disorder. Welcome to my podcast, Dr. Satana McCormick-Stewart.
Hey, girl.
Hey, girl. Hey.
Hey.
So I wanted to talk about this, Satana, because I spend a lot of time on social media, probably more time than I should. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if it's just the climate of what's going on, but I find myself running across a lot of reels and podcasts and posts about narcissistic personality disorder. Mm-hmm. And I can't help but to feel like a little bit of that might be displaced because people aren't pleased with the way that a relationship is going or ended. Mm-hmm. And that is a very serious diagnosis. So the DSM-5 diagnosis for NPD or narcissistic personality disorder, I wanted you to kind of lay the foundation for folks to understand what it actually is. So people may be involved with folks who actually are narcissistic and or may not have been diagnosed but have those traits. So how do you define narcissistic personality disorder in clinical terms? Right. And what separates it from everyday narcissistic traits that most people might have?
Okay. Well, clinically, we would define it as excessive focus on yourself. Mm-hmm. Or having a high esteem of oneself, including strong need for admiration, a sense of superiority, and a lack of empathy for others. And you asked what made that different from normal, and that's the piece that does that empathy.
The empathy.
That caring for others, that ability to see others instead of just yourself.
So just as an example, if something were to happen, say a friend or a loved one loses someone near and dear to them, how might a person with NPD or narcissistic personality disorder react in that particular scenario?
They wouldn't be able to feel what that person's feeling. Okay. They would actually probably make light of that person's feelings because of the way that they feel and that the fact that they lack that empathy for others.
Okay. So many people casually label, and I wanted to touch on this because as I said, in the introduction, they casually label that person's narcissistic. He's narcissistic. Right. She's narcissistic.
Right.
Because things aren't going the way they think it should go. And I don't ever want to just label anybody that doesn't deserve the label. Now, surely there are folks out there that wear it and wear it well.
Most definitely.
But many people casually label this difficult people as being narcissistic. What are the biggest misconceptions that you hear about that aren't really folks that might have narcissism?
A lot of times folks that stay to themselves are perceived as being narcissistic. They are perceived as folks who are self-centered or who don't have a care or concern for others, when really they're just protecting themselves.
Okay. Okay. Protecting themselves from what?
Protecting themselves from people who are narcissistic, basically,
Okay. Yeah.
and also protecting their peace, as people say.
There's nothing wrong with protecting your peace.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
So that doesn't mean that they're narcissistic just because they choose to live their lives in that way. That just means that they have determined that this is how they want to live. These are the things that they're going to accept, and these are the things that they're not going to accept. So if you are a person that exudes those qualities, then they have the right to determine whether or not they choose to deal with it.
So there's a difference between being selfish a little bit. You can be selfish with your time. I can be a little selfish with my time than lacking empathy.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes. When folks say, I choose me, or I'm choosing to spend time alone or doing things that I enjoy, I think that is really important to understand that there is a difference. It doesn't mean you don't care about other folks.
Right. And it doesn't mean that I feel I'm better than you.
Right.
It doesn't mean that.
Sometimes you got to put your energy back into that glass so that glass is not half full.
Correct.
For sure.
Correct.
What are the diagnostic criteria? So we're going to talk a little bit about the DSM-5 for NPD, or narcissistic personality disorder. So what do you think, or which ones tend to show up most clearly in real life relationships?
Well, there are actually 5 traits.
Okay.
Of those 5 traits, one being inflated sense of self-importance, which we discussed earlier, a constant need for praise or attention, okay? Difficulty understanding or caring about others' feelings, that's that empathy. Sensitivity to criticism. Can't take that.
Oh my goodness.
And the belief that they are special or more deserving than others. So to answer your question, I think the one that we see the most is that sensitivity to criticism.
Yeah.
Nobody can tell them that they're wrong.
Can't nobody tell you nothing. Okay, so it takes 5, right? So it takes 5 criteria for a diagnosis.
Yes.
What about if a person, say, has 3 of the criteria, but they are glaring? I mean, you can't take the criticism. You've got this false sense of self, and you have one of the others. Would you say it's a safe bet to maybe engage in a relationship with a person who may have 3 of the 5, and those 3 are really significant?
Well, I think it's fine to engage with a person that has the 5. I think a lot of times we see that as being a bad thing. We see a narcissistic person as being a bad thing. As long as we set clear boundaries, as we should always do in a relationship, then we won't have problems, even with a narcissistic person. Because that person will have a clear understanding as to what you're going to accept and what you're not going to accept in the relationship. Yeah. So as long as that's established, then you won't have a problem, even though that person may have those traits.
I want you to hold on to that because in a few, I have a specific question about narcissism and relationships, like romantic relationships, and setting boundaries. And I do want you to hold on to that. But before we move on to that, let's talk about the root causes. Is there a cause? Is it a childhood traumatic experience? Is it genetics? What is it that actually causes a person to maybe inherit or have those traits?
Well, it can start from an infant. It can start from an infant who doesn't have a desire to release his bottle to his mom until he's completely finished. Okay. And I know you're looking like, what, really? But that sense of control.
Very early on.
Early on. We don't even see it.
You don't think about that.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. And then it goes on into toddlers who don't want to share their toys. The same type thing. Then it goes on to only children, which is something that a lot of narcissistic people start at because of the fact that as an only child, you are forced to grow up alone. You are forced to develop characteristics of being alone. Okay? The important thing is that you establish healthy characteristics. Okay?
Yeah.
And you still maintain the ability to cope and deal and interact with others. And once you're able to do that, then you don't find yourself going towards that narcissistic trait.
And what about, Sultana, only children who get lots of attention?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Could that possibly lead them to develop those traits?
Yes, because that attention-seeking behavior can turn into something that's very negative. Because when they get older, they're still expecting that attention from those that are around them.
Yeah.
And if a parent has overly given that to them, then that's what they're going to seek in their relationships and when they're interacting with other individuals.
Yeah, yeah. Good point, good point. So how does narcissism typically develop, though, over time? And are there early signs? As you've already mentioned it, you've already mentioned some of the baby not releasing the bottle. But let's talk about like in a young adult.
Yeah.
Are there other signs other than, okay, there's an only child who is by themselves? Are there other little signs that you can share that folks need to kind of be mindful of when you're talking about young adults?
Yes, honestly, we don't think about this, but children who are involved in divorce are very likely to develop these traits because of the fact that there may be one parent that gives them something different than the other parent does. And so they tend to grow towards the most rewarding things.
Gotcha.
So if one parent is not doing that, then this person who has become consumed in the rewarding things will want that and nothing but that.
Right.
And they'll grow older with that same desire.
Always searching for the reward.
Exactly. And carry that on into their relationships as well.
Wow. Wow. So perfect segue to talk about relationships. And you had mentioned a few moments ago about the purpose of the importance of setting boundaries. And I, as I said, have just kind of read and seen so much on social media. There's this phase of what they call love bombing.
Right.
And so when folks are involved romantically or in a dating relationship initially, there's this discussion about being love bombed. Can you tell us what is love bombing? And are people less likely to set boundaries when they're being love bombed? Because it sounds like to me, if you're going to be love bombed and things are going great, there are no reasons to put boundaries in place.
Right. I think the person that came up with love bombing is a narcissist. To be honest.
You might be right. You might be right.
I mean, to be totally honest with you. Because love bombing is just that. It's just throwing or expecting that love to be thrown to you.
To the narcissist.
Yes. And to you only. You know, feeling that other person is supposed to give that all to you. That attention, that love, that affection, everything is supposed to be to you.
Right.
But as I stated earlier, the important thing is setting those boundaries. But the number one thing in a relationship is to protect your own well-being. So if you see these things early in the relationship, then that should be a red flag.
Be a runner. Be a track star.
What?
Absolutely. Yes. Okay. And then there are other behaviors and patterns during that phase of dating. So what are some of the most common behavioral patterns, in addition to love bombing, that people experience when they're in a relationship with a person with narcissism?
That ego. That ego starts to rear its ugly head, and they are constantly seeking validation, and they want your praise because they feel like if you've chosen me, then you need to give me everything.
And not willing to reciprocate.
At that part. Exactly.
I can only imagine what the person on the other side of the relationship is gaining. Absolutely nothing.
And so what happens in turn is the power struggle. Because then you're like, well, I deserve something too.
Yeah.
You know, I'm human. I have feelings.
Yeah.
So I deserve something too.
Yeah. There is one thing that I want you to touch on, because I don't want there to be any misconceptions. And I'm fair. I'm a fair fighter.
narcissism is not just about men. I think a lot of times people think, oh my God, he's a narcissist, or I saw something, it's him, it's him, it's him. It can be her too.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about women and narcissism, and how prevalent is it?
A lot of times it's prevalent in women who have been hurt in relationships. A woman scorned is one who has decided that she's not going to take anything from anybody and only wants the best. And unfortunately, that's not a bad thing, so to speak, but it's the way that she exudes her energy to receive those things that turns into the negative aspect. Okay. And that's what turns her into that person, you know, because she's determined she won't be hurt again. She's determined she won't be treated this way again. She's determined she won't sacrifice or give of herself in this way again. And as a result, she's turned into this negative person.
So is that Sultana just protecting her peace, protecting her space?
Well, that's what she feels. That's what she feels.
Okay.
But we can protect our peace and still be positive.
Yes, we can. Yes, we can. Good point. Good point. Okay. So it's not necessarily a positive protecting peace. She could truly, in fact, have some traits of NPD.
Yes, she can.
Okay.
She can.
Okay.
And I wouldn't say that it's contagious, but if you are around someone, it's just like anything. If you're around someone and you're constantly dealing with this, you're constantly seeing it, you're constantly having it affect you in some way, then it's a possibility that you can actually get it. Yeah. You know, not that this person gave it to you, but those emotions, you know, the impact of the process will make it difficult for you to avoid having those same feelings.
And we're going to get to this. We're going to talk about it some more because you are a licensed clinical provider. Can a person be healed from NPD without intervention, without going to a clinician? And if they can, I would love to hear about that. But if they can't, how long should they stay in treatment? Is it lifetime?
Well, there's no such thing as a cure. Okay. But change is possible. Okay. Just like anything, change is possible. And you don't necessarily have to see a therapist. But the first step is admitting you have a problem.
Yes, admission is the first sign that you want to change.
Okay. That self-awareness. And recognizing that there's a problem and a need for change. Okay? Yeah. You have to make that first step. And then consistency. Consistency with wanting to change. You know, wanting to take the steps, wanting to do what it takes. Right. You know, that's necessary. Now, we won't lie. The progress might be slow. You know, depending upon what level you may be or how long you may have been dealing with this. Yeah. You know, the process may be long. But you need to set realistic expectations for yourself and be like, look, I can improve. I know I can improve. Some others might, you know, be limited to change because they're just so set in their ways. That they're like, no, I'm good. I'm fine. I'm happy with the way that I am.
Are there ever instances you feel, or have you heard or treated folks who may only change temporarily to only hoover a person who they may have been in a relationship with, just to say, I'm going to change? And that change is not really a change from the person themselves who actually has been diagnosed with the NPD.
Well, we all know how people make promises, okay? Especially in relationships. You know, we're all guilty of that. You know, whatever it is, you know, for whatever reason, that person might say, I'm going to change. I don't want to lose you. I'm going to change because I'm sorry I made you feel this way, okay? Whatever they feel is going to take for this person to not feel the same way about them. Yeah. Does that mean they're telling the truth? Only they know.
Right. Okay. You also mentioned there are different levels. How many levels of narcissism are there? What are they?
Oh gosh.
It sounds like a spectrum to me.
No, it's not. It's
not
truly,
a spectrum.
It's truly not a spectrum.
Okay.
It's just basically how you choose. I wanna choose the right word. How you choose to live in your narcissism.
Okay.
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 Whether or not you're doing it just to please yourself. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Whether or not you're doing it as a way to survive.
Mm-hmm.
Or whether or not you're doing it because you just don't care.
Oof. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because there's some people who just don't care. You know, they're like, this is who I am.
And I don't care.
Yeah. Whether you like it or not. This is who I am. This is what I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to be. Either you choose to deal with it or not.
And that sounds like the extreme case.
That's the extreme case.
That's the extreme. Okay. Okay. So how does a narcissist typically respond when their partner sets those boundaries you were talking about earlier? Or challenge their behavior in any way?
Girl, that's when the manipulation
techniques
come in. You know, that's when the gaslighting, you know, make you doubt what you're thinking or what you're saying.
Yeah, or
like
what you saw.
Yeah, you're wrong. That wasn't me. I didn't do that.
Oh my God.
I didn't do that.
Okay.
You know, that's one of the first things. And then, of course, guilt tripping. You know, like making you feel guilty for even thinking that about them.
Mm-hmm.
How could you even think that about that person?
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah.
And then lastly, playing the victim. Woe is me.
Woe is me. Oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah. And once they do these things, it's like they actually start you thinking.
They're going to make the partners think they need to be in the DSM-5.
That's exactly. Maybe I am doing this to
crazy.
them. Maybe I am making them feel this way. Maybe I do need to change.
Yeah. Oh, God.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And that could go on and on and on.
And on and on.
On an average, what do you think, or from your experience in therapy and being a clinician, how many folks actually say, okay, I can do this with this person. I'm going to work with this person. And then they go, I can't do this. And then they come back, I'm going to try again. Like, how often do you see repeat offenders?
Very often. Very often. Because we're sitting here talking about it and I'm telling you, you know, possibilities, but that doesn't mean it's easy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? A lot of times we need to seek assistance. We might need to seek friends. We might need to seek family members because they've experienced it too. A lot of them may not just say anything about it because they love this person, or they may even fear the person's reaction.
Yeah.
Which is why they decide to stay, silent.
Mm-hmm.
But they've experienced the same things that you have, and they've gone through the same things you've gone through. Right. And sometimes you may want to seek their assistance in helping this person.
Right.
Because of that. But you got to keep your perspectives grounded. You gotta make sure you realize that, that this is not easy. You need to accept that when you accept the fact that you're going to help this person.
Yeah. Yeah. And I wanted to talk about this today, and I wanted to talk to you about it because NPD really is, we've said it, it's in a DSM-5. It is a mental health condition.
Yes, it is.
And it wouldn't be in there if it weren't.
Exactly.
And I don't want to hear people make light of it and use the term loosely when it is such a serious issue.
It is.
And the one thing that I wanted to kind of close with and ask is disclosure is a big thing.
Yes.
Do you find that many folks are impacted even in a professional setting on their jobs because of their diagnosis, or will not disclose it when it might actually benefit them being honest about it in the workforce?
Yeah, I think disclosure is very important. And I think a lot of times that goes back to the acceptance piece. Mm-hmm. So if they're not accepting it, they're not going to disclose what they don't feel exists.
Correct. You're right.
And that goes back to being that person who's trying to help them.
Mm-hmm.
A part of helping them is realizing when it's time to let go.
Yeah. Yeah.
And realizing when it's time to walk away and when your help is just not going to help. You know, because then that becomes something that's detrimental to you and yourself.
Yeah. Okay.
And so it's really important. But like you said, in the workplace, it's very important, especially someone who's a manager or in a managerial position, because that's not helping. That's feeding this ego.
Right.
You know, and sometimes it could be detrimental to the diagnosis.
And the blame shift of your team.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Sometimes it can be very difficult when you have someone who's in a position who has this condition.
Yeah.
Because it can make it difficult for you to even interact with them as a person, let alone as a boss.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here, for clarifying for me, for my listeners. But I always, and I know you tune into When It Rains,
yes,
so you know I'm going to ask.
Yes.
Before you leave, what is one lesson you wish everyone knew when it comes to overcoming a life storm? Because we all have storms. We all have them. So what advice would you give?
The advice that I would give with overcoming the storm is remembering that we all have our own personal umbrella.
I like that. Is your umbrella pink and green?
The umbrella's pink and green.
But yes, we all have them. Have your own personal umbrella. That's great.
Yes.
That's great. Thank you, Dr. Sultana McCormick-Stewart, and everybody who's tuning in to When It Rains. Thank you so much for listening.